Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the first information session of the Joint Defense Call 2022. My name is Alexander Link. I am Defense Industry Coordinator at Luxinnovation, and it will be my pleasure to walk you today through the agenda. Before starting, be informed that you can use the chat box on the right side of your screen to write down your questions during the information session. We will address them at the end of the presentations. And I moreover would like to point out that the info session will be recorded and be made available to you right after the webinar. As you know, Luxembourg's Ministers of Defense, Economy and Research have officially launched the first joint defense call last Friday during the joint press conference. In this context, the Directorate of Defence has committed to increase its defense R&D spendings within the next years up to 2% of the total budget. And the Ministry of Economy and the Ministry of Research through the National Research Fund have also committed to contribute financially to the development of dual-use technologies in the frame of this joint call. I am therefore very pleased today to have with us for the introduction Colonel Guy Hoffmann from the Directorate of Defence and Richard Nackert from the National Research Fund, FNR. Marco Valentini of the Ministry of the Economy unfortunately had to cancel his participation shortly, which is why I will provide you with a brief summary of what Minister Fayot said last week. This being said, I would like to invite Colonel Hoffmann to take the floor. Mr. Nackert will then follow on afterwards.
Thank you, Mr. Link, for the introduction and also for inviting me and through me, the Director of Defense, to this launch event for the Joint Defense Call 2022. So for defense, this is very important to be part of it, because it will give an opportunity to national companies and research centers to maybe get a foot in the doorstep of NATO and EU acquisition projects for the upcoming years. Another point that's very important for Director of Defense, also especially for the minister, is as was already said by Mr. Ling, is that we try to find a dual use to capacities that can be used as well on the civilian side, as well as on the military side or defense side. So that the two most important impacts for our minister. And last but not least, the dual use will also maybe have an impact on the future on climate change, where also our minister really has very high interest in developing and innovation in this direction. Because as you all might know, defense is until now not the most climate friendly domain, but there are a lot of hopes that through military and the defense needs, there will be new innovations that are launched in climate, and that can help to go in the good direction. So I now give back the floor to Mr. Ling, and I thank you for assisting to this launch. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Hoffmann, for these introducing words. I clearly point out that the future is very much directed towards climate change, and the Directorate of Defense clearly has objectives to support this also on the dual-use side. With this, I would then give on to Richard Nackert of the FNR for the introducing words.
Thank you, Alexander, for the introduction. Like you said, my name is Richard Nackert. I'm a program manager at the Fonds National de la Recherche, and some of you might know that I'm primarily in charge of the public-private partnerships here at the FNR. So I am pleased to present this new funding opportunity together with my colleagues from the ministries and, of course, Luxinnovation. And to perhaps give you a perspective from our side, this call is now the third of a series of new strategically oriented calls in direct collaboration with different ministries. The first one being the health tech call between the Ministry of the Economy and FNR with support of Luxinnovation, which was carried out last year. The second one was between the Ministry of Agriculture and FNR, targeting innovative, resilient and sustainable farming practice. And this is now already the third and certainly most complex one, involving the Directorate of Defence, as you know, of the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, the Ministry of the Economy and FNR, and is supported by Luxinnovation. But I want to point out that despite its complexities, the public research organizations will find out that most of the call characteristics are familiar to them with just a few key elements that they need to be aware of. And so we have 4 parties joining together in this endeavor to provide you with new funding opportunities. And I'm very curious what the Luxembourgish research and industrial landscape will bring forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Richard, for these words, and we'll see you also later then in presentations. I would just then briefly also give a view on what has been said by the Minister of the Economy last week. So for them, the joint call on dual-use technologies in space and lightweight materials definitely contributes to the diversification strategy of Luxembourg, as both space and lightweight materials are domains where Luxembourg has already strong capabilities. The call itself is not only aiming at strengthening existing and developing new capacities within the Luxembourgish industry, it ultimately also aims at supporting the Luxembourgish industry to get access to commercial opportunities within the EU defense value chain. And Minister Fayo eventually also pointed out that the startups have their role to play within the defense market and therefore are very much encouraged to position themselves within this call with innovative project ideas. With this, we would then go on to the next agenda point of the information session. Benjamin Castier, Director for R&D and Innovation Support at Luxinnovation, will present the research industry collaboration platform, which has been set up to increase collaboration among research organizations and the business sector, and which will also serve as the application platform for the first phase of the joint defense call. Benjamin, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Alexander, and good morning, everyone. For this context, I would just like to remind quickly why Luxinnovation is also involved here. Among the fact that we have a great collaboration mission with the Directorate of Defence, for which I thank them very much. It's also our mission to empower companies to innovate so that they would be ready for tomorrow. And for that, we try to develop individual tools and supporting measures for you to get to the next step. But also part of our mission on larger ecosystem level is that we want to identify opportunities and foster collaboration projects that stimulate the entire ecosystem in view of a sustainable, competitive and digital economy. So together with the Directorate of Defence and the Ministry of Economy and the FNR, we are building this joint call to create, in fact, more opportunities, larger opportunities for you to foster R&D in collaborative patterns and enhance interactions with our community in order to create more impact than only individual projects. And the impact we're looking for are, of course, on the defense topics that will be detailed later on in the presentation, but it's also to foster step by step an ecosystem where public and private initiatives are more common and they can contribute to create value in sectors that are already important for our country, like space, materials, health tech, and of course, HPC and data analytics. So in that sense, we have developed a platform. It's called researchindustrycollaboration.lu. We put little minuses between research and industry and collaboration. And there you will find a platform. So the first mission of this platform is, of course, to bring together public and private research. So anyone can create an account, can try to share ideas, interests, topics, etc. And so that what we are looking for is, of course, to stimulate the exchange of ideas and opportunities and eventually have a successful matchmaking. The platform also proposes a toolkit where you can find guidelines on how to create the most effective partnerships, where we talk about collaboration patterns, best practices, IP, funding mechanisms, etc., etc. But these are really more general concerns where, as a smaller company, you would like to know what would be the first steps on how to set up collaborations. And of course, our advisors can help you with that as well. More specifically for today, of course, it's that we've used this platform already once for the help desk call that Richard mentioned earlier. Now today we will use this one also for the defense call that will be detailed later. And as Alex said, the first stage is really for you to get online, to be aware about who is intended to do what, because of course there are individual opportunities, but mostly collaborative opportunities. And so that there can be a first stage of matchmaking. Also, the first stage of the proposal would have to be submitted through the platform. And eventually, what's really important is that, of course, using the platform for the submission, but also to stay updated on different news that could happen and all the Q&As that we will update there as well. You might also want to stay in touch for any further calls that might be published later this year. So that's the main information on my side. I thank everyone for being here today. I wish you a very interesting and fruitful meeting, and I give the floor back to Alex.
Thank you, Benjamin, for the overview of the mission and the concept of the Research Industry Collaboration Platform. We will see in the upcoming presentations how you can register, share, or view project ideas, and with the ultimate aim, of course, of applying to the first joint defense call on dual-use technologies. So let's now start with the presentation of the defense call itself. I will present it together with Richard Nackert from the FNR and my colleague Erik Lauer. So here you just see rapidly the agenda. We are now on the third bullet point. And well, we have already seen that this first joint defense call is a result of collaboration between the Directorate of Defence, the Ministry of the Economy, the National Research Fund, and Luxinnovation. I think it's also important to mention that with the exception of Luxinnovation, all parties are granting authorities. The Directorate of Defence has the right to veto projects, and the Ministry of the Economy and the FNR will be using existing aid schemes to award companies and research organizations separately. Luxinnovation, on the other side, manages the research industry collaboration platform and is also coordinating the Luxembourg defense industry activities in the frame of a collaboration with the Directorate of Defense. And in the next slide, you will get a brief overview on the activities that are covered within this collaboration. So the collaboration between Luxinnovation and the Luxembourg Directorate of Defense was set up in 2020 with the aim of helping the Luxembourg industry to get access to the European defense market. This collaboration includes today 4 operational activities. The first one consists in supporting national initiatives enabling the Luxembourg industry to be recognized by the Directorate of Defense. The joint defense call on dual-use technologies is certainly a key element, as it aims at providing companies and research organizations with a first funding contract with the Directorate of Defense. This recognition at national level shall then enable higher visibility and attractiveness to our industry for engaging with prime contractors and other ministries of defense within European initiatives such as the European Defense Agency and the European Defense Fund. The ultimate aim, nevertheless, represents the NATO procurement programs where most of the defense budget spending goes, and we want, of course, to ensure that our Luxembourg industry has the necessary baggage to be able to participate in those programs. In a nutshell, these 4 programs all aim at supporting our industry to integrate the EU and NATO defense value chain. And in order to do this, Luxinnovation also fosters the creation of a defense industry community. In fact, there is no intention to create a defense cluster as such. the strategic priority sectors have already been defined by the government, and the defense industry community shall in that sense be built around those existing priorities. So far, this has worked rather well. In fact, the first Luxembourg defense industry catalog was released yesterday and includes already 46 companies and research organizations. And eventually, I also would like to mention briefly that promoting Luxembourg's technology capabilities in the defense domain at international level is also an essential part of our mission. And as such, Luxinnovation, in collaboration with the Chamber of Commerce, will participate next week for the first time with a Luxembourgish pavilion to the Eurosatory in Paris, the world's largest defense and security exhibition. Let's now get back to the joint defense call. So the reason for establishing the joint call has been explained by the previous speakers. I would nevertheless like to point out again the considerable leveraging effect that an R&D contract with the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence can have. This national call aims at strengthening our industry to be better prepared for the European defence market, and R&D and commercial opportunities will eventually arise within programs such as the EDA, EDF, and NATO, where prime contractors and European ministries of defence come together. It is nevertheless important to mention that these programs do not need to be taken into consideration for the national call. Establishing a link to these programs as such is not compulsory. Nevertheless, it can be useful for those companies and research organizations which have no relation yet with the defense ecosystem, as they can find within the EDA and the EDF technology priority domains which are relevant to EU defense, and the same goes, of course, for the strategy publications of the Luxembourg Directorate of Defence. Now, let's see the call objectives. The call aims at developing and validating innovative dual-use defense solutions that can potentially benefit the national defense forces, international defense organizations, and defense forces of allied nations, as well as civilian research and local industry. There are four main characteristics to the call. Firstly, the call for proposals focuses on national industry only, and as such has several objectives: getting recognized by the Directorate of Defense, strengthening the national innovation capacity, and prepare Luxembourg's industry to the EU defense ecosystem. Second, the focus on dual-use technologies allows for both the creation of new knowledge as well as the adaptation of existing technologies coming from the civilian domain. Thirdly, the call is open to all development stages up to system prototyping, so the decision itself to focus on technological readiness levels from 1 to 6 was in fact not only made to ensure access to both research organizations and companies. This is also due to the fact that for the validation of prototypes, in most cases, there will be a requirement to integrate the EU defense value chain, meaning prime contractors and MODs from other EU and NATO countries, which are again to be found via initiatives such as the European Defence Agency, the European Defence Fund, and NATO. And eventually, it is important to say that the joint defense call was designed in such a way to provide a maximum of flexibility to the applicants. This means that companies and research organizations can submit as many project outlines as they want. It needs, of course, to be within their own budgetary limits, but also both individual and collaborative projects are eligible. And eventually, even though the call focuses on space and lightweight materials and provides guidance on which specific domains shall be addressed in the project proposals, it remains a bottom-up call. So, what are the technology domains which have been selected for this year's joint defense call? For the space part, you can see that it covers many areas, including satellite communication, Earth observation and reconnaissance, space situational awareness and space operations, as well as data processing. On the material side, the focus will be put on lightweight structures and composite materials. Of course, you'll find more details in the call text, including examples of relevant technologies in these domains. Regarding the targeted R&D maturity levels, it was said before that the call for proposals offers high flexibility in the sense that all technological readiness levels between 1 and 6 can be addressed. For those which are less familiar with the TRLs, this basically covers research and development activities starting from generating and integrating knowledge up to system prototyping. It is then up to the applicant to decide which maturity level they want to address within the project proposal. In case of system prototyping, this should ideally enable the identification of potential prime contractors. Now, who is eligible for this joint call? As mentioned earlier, both Luxembourgish research organizations and companies are eligible, while research organizations need to be eligible under Article 3 of the FNR status and registered at the FNR. Some specificities also apply to companies. First of all, they need to be registered in Luxembourg or must be willing to establish an entity in Luxembourg before the start of the second phase of the call for proposals. Secondly, as the R&D grants of the Ministry of the Economy are conditioned by the state aid regulation of the European Union, companies with more than 3 years of existence must ensure not to be considered as an undertaking in difficulty. What does this mean? Well, basically, this is a verification step that is done on the basis of the annual accounts and more specifically on the balance sheet of the companies. As such, if more than half of the subscribed capital, share capital, including share premiums, has disappeared due to accumulated losses, then your company would be considered as an undertaking in difficulty and thereby declared as ineligible. As said before, this ineligibility criteria does not apply to startups with less than 3 years. On top of this eligibility criteria, companies need to ensure 2 essential criteria. First, they need to demonstrate their viability and financial soundness regarding their contribution to the projects. And second, they need to demonstrate the positive impact of the expected project outcome on their growth and future assets. Now, as mentioned initially, the funding schemes used in the frame of this joint calls are existing ones. As such, the Ministry of the Economy, which will be in charge for providing R&D grants to companies, will use the R&D aid schemes from the Research, Development and Innovation Law. For the joint call, some specific questions have been set up. Some specific conditions have been set up. So first and most importantly, a 35% upfront payment will be allowed within the funding agreement between the company and the Ministry of the Economy. Second, the Ministry of Economy will provide grants up to 700,000 euros for both individual and collaborative projects. Thirdly, the aid rates will lie between 25 and 70%, depending on both the size of the company and the technological challenges that will be addressed within the project proposals. And eventually, in case of a collaboration with a company or research organization, a top-up of 50% will be applied. In this slide, you can see that with regards to the technological challenges, differentiation is made between industrial research and experimental development. And as you can see, the size of the company impacts the aid intensity. So, as an example, if you are a small company, according to the European SME definition, if you collaborate with a research organization or company, and if your R&D project proposal covers activities from design up to system prototyping, which would basically fall under industrial research and experimental development, in that case, your aid rate would be between 45 to 70% plus the 50% for the collaboration, representing thereby potentially more than 70% of aid rate. The funding conditions for research organizations, as well as the submission and evaluation process of the call, will now be presented in the next slide by my colleague Richard Nackert. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. So I will now present you a couple of slides concerning the properties of the program, and compared to the eligibility criteria and the funding conditions for companies, the conditions for the public research organizations in Luxembourg are quite straightforward. Oops. So here we are. So we are having a maximum funding rate of up to 100%, under the condition, of course, that your costs are eligible under our financial regulations, as you are aware of, and as long as you're under the maximum ceiling of the funding. Meaning that since we are having multiple options for research organizations to participate here as individual applications or collaborative applications, that meaning that we have a funding ceiling of 500,000 euros per project for just projects without companies. Yeah? If a company is involved in the consortium with a public research organization, then we can increase this ceiling up to 700,000. And I will explain this in a little bit more detail in the next slide, because we're having a multitude of options here with different funding ceilings. So as Alexander already pointed out, we can have individual and collaborative projects in this call, and the collaborations are eligible in any type of combination. And these combinations are visualized here, meaning that a company can have an individual application, and with an individual application, the company can get up to 700,000 euros per project on maximum state aid, meaning the company can get up to 107,000 itself. The same goes for a research organization, not the ceiling, but that if a research organization puts forward an individual application, all the 500,000 could be used by the one single research organization. If we're having collaborative projects, we must differentiate between collaborative projects of a single sector, so only public collaborative projects, or only company collaborative projects, meaning that if 2 or more research organizations form a consortium, then the maximum ceiling is still 500,000 euros per project, meaning then we need to share these 500,000 euros within the project. The same goes for companies. For 2 or more companies forming a consortium, they need to share their 700,000 euro ceiling amongst themselves per project. The only thing is then, and of course, as a little incentive for public-private partnerships, if a company forms a collaboration with a research organization, then both the company side and the research side can get 700,000 each, meaning that the overall maximum grant allotted to this project can be up to 1.4 million. 700,000 for the research from the FNR, 700,000 from the Ministry of the Economy towards the company side. Now I want to present you the timeline of the submission and the evaluation process of this call. As you know, and as was already presented, last Friday on the 3rd of June, the call started. And we are having a submission deadline on the end of July, namely on the 29th of July. The phase 1 submission, as we call it, is to be submitted on a research industry collaboration platform, as Benjamin already explained. After the submission deadline, we will start with the evaluation process until September, meaning that the project outlines will be reviewed by the granting authorities. Luxinnovation will perform an eligibility and financial viability check, as just presented by Alexander. And in the end, there will be a go or no-go decision, including potential recommendations towards phase 2, meaning either you get a positive answer with possible recommendations, and you can provide a full proposal in phase 2, or you will get a no-go decision. In the phase 2, which begins on the 5th of September, the submission starts on this 5th of September. You can get coaching from Luxinnovation for companies, and there will be different Q&A sessions scheduled in June and July. The full project proposal, in contrast to phase 1, however, needs to be submitted for companies on MyGuichet and for the public research organizations via our grant management system. For the public research organizations, it's the same grant management system for all our project applications. The deadline for the submission is then end of October on the 28th, and then the projects that are being submitted will be reviewed by an independent expert panel. All the projects will go through this panel. The panel will form then a recommendation towards a funding or award decision. These award decision, or for the FNR at least, will, as the public research organizations are used to, will form the major basis of our award. So the FNR usually follows the independent expert panel. The independent expert panel also provides a recommendation towards the Ministry of the Economy for funding. But the Ministry of the Economy has a separate state aid commission, as per usual, for every of their RDI law funding, and they will form their final funding decision after that. And in the end, FNR and MECO, in collaborative projects, when a company and a public research organization is involved, will form a joint funding decision, meaning that the project, if it is a collaborative project between the public and the private side, cannot be awarded by a single granting authority. For the submission and evaluation process, I want to hand over back to Alexander because there are some specificities that are mostly relevant for companies and no specialties for public research organizations.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think, as you just pointed out, so it's important to understand that there will be a pre-selection of projects by the granting authorities in phase 1. So the main criteria used within the phase 1 evaluation will be the alignment with the call text, but we will also look at the eligibility with regards to the state aids, as well as compulsory information to be provided in phase 1. So for companies, there will in fact be a particular attention to their co-funding capacity. Why? Because the aid rates of the Ministry of the Economy do not cover the entire project-related costs. It is therefore essential that project budgets are actually adapted to the co-funding capacity. Now, which is this compulsory information that will be needed within the first phase? Well, this is, of course, the project description and cost estimation, which you will need to fill in on the research industry collaboration platform once you have created a project. Furthermore, it will be necessary to fill in a declaration of honor regarding the nationalities of researchers and employees that would be working on the R&D project. So this is in fact a requirement from the Directorate of Defence, as employees from companies and research organizations taking part in the project need to have nationalities of a NATO member country or from a EU, European Economic Area or European Free Trade Association country. You'll find the detailed list of countries within the annexes of the call text. Then a curriculum vitae of the employees working on these projects will also be needed. And here also adequate templates can be downloaded on the platform during the project creation process. For companies, then there will also be some additional requirements. So an organigram with the shareholders from the applicant and other entities that are detained by the same shareholders need to be provided. In fact, due to the EU regulation on state aids, it is necessary to provide full transparency up to the ultimate beneficial owners of the company. Moreover, the companies will need to provide the annual accounts from 2020 and 21, and this applies also to the group they belong to, if applicable. And eventually for startups, it will be necessary to provide a business plan and a cash flow forecast. Also here, adequate templates will be available on the platform. With this, I give the work back to Richard, who will then explain in a more general manner the submission and evaluation process for phase 2. And this will become more relevant once your project outlines have made it through the first phase of the call. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexander. So, as I realize now, I have been going into quite some detail already into the evaluation of phase 2. So the presentation on this slide is perhaps a little bit redundant, but as a recap, I will say that we'll have the full project proposal submission deadline on 28th of October. And it is important to know that in this phase, the companies will submit their project proposals via MyGuichet and the public research organization separately to our grant management system. All of the project proposals, regardless of their shape, will be reviewed by an independent expert panel. And in the next slide, in a short while, I will shortly tell you something about the evaluation criteria that are being used here. The independent expert panel will form a recommendation on projects to be awarded. And as already said, for the FNR, this is the most important basis in forming an award decision. All projects involving companies, nevertheless, will go through the separate State Aid Commission consultation for projects. And with this, I will show you some of the evaluation criteria. Please note that you will find additional criteria and a full checklist within the call text on the Research Collaboration and Industry platform. There are basically three main criteria, as is the norm in every research project proposal. We are having relevance, impact, and the implementation. And what do they entail, basically? For relevance, we are having the project idea, the clarity and pertinence of the objectives. The level of information is, of course, to be reviewed. And, of course, the relevance to the dual use application or the relevance to the program as a whole. So we will look at your idea and how it is to be applied to the program. How relevant is it to the program? The second one is the impact. So here we're focusing on the outcomes. We're looking at the added value for defense purposes or dual use, addressing market opportunities in the defense sector, soundness of business plans, exploitation and dissemination of project results, and their capacity to be translated into assets. And of course, the ambition of being recognized as Luxembourgish tech provider within EU defense and supply chain. For being a research organization, you might think, okay, there's a lot of impact for companies in there. And this might look as it is. But for you, the evaluation criteria will not differ much concerning the impact than you are used to in our other funding programs, except for the relevance, of course, for the defense sector. Meaning also that even though we are having a scale between TRL 1 to 6, TRL 1, where we basically have just the criteria of basic principles observed in a laboratory, will perhaps not by itself be a good idea to be forwarded if you don't have any idea what to do with it. Meaning by that is that the higher we are going into the TRL scale, the easier it is, of course, to show the impact later on, meaning turning it into an asset, the purpose or the relevance for the defense sector. And even though we are going down to TRL 1, you still need to have a clear idea what you want to do next. What do you want to do with the results that your research will perform? That is still the impact. That should be noted. And the last and very important one, of course, is the implementation, meaning the quality and efficiency of the project plan. And this concerns everything that is basically giving us confidence of putting money into this project. So everything in there, the coherence and the effectiveness of the work plan, the competencies and the experiences and the complementarity of the team, everything you put in forward there is to be used to convince us that all your good ideas, your good intentions, and the high impact that you want to show is feasible, that it is doable, that we think, yes, this project is in good hands. They know not only where they are and where they want to be, but also how they are going to get there. With this, I want to thank you and hand over again to, I think, Eric, who will provide you some information on the Luxinnovation Support in preparation of the defense call submission deadline. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and good morning to everyone. So my name is Erik Lauer, and I'm part of the corporate R&D and innovation support team here at Luxinnovation. In the next few slides, I will go over the support Luxinnovation will offer within this defense call, as well as a short glimpse into the functioning of the platform. So Luxinnovation will support the companies in both phases of this defense call. So in the first phase, Luxinnovation will assist in the awareness raising on eligibility and financial viability and how to document this. This will mainly be done through free Q&A sessions, which we will see on the next slide. In the second phase, Luxinnovation will assist in reviewing and stress testing the application of the companies in regards to the innovative nature, the business model and exploitation plan, the financial capacity of the company. Additionally, Luxinnovation can support in the domains of intellectual property, the project scoping and the structure, the competencies and relationship building, and also in the project financing. Regarding the different Q&A sessions, we will organize free, and you have the dates here on the left. The links for the inscription can be found on the platform. We will start with the first Q&A session on the 28th of June, where we will be covering the main eligibility criteria, which have already been presented by Alexander, such as assessing the group size based on the SME analysis or the undertaking in difficulty criteria. Here we will provide additional information regarding this and the documentation needed. Additionally, we will discuss the eligible project costs and how to estimate these. This will be followed by a Q&A. On the 12th of July, we will discuss the subject of the co-funding capacity and how a company assesses its own capacity with regards to the total project costs. Additionally, for startups who need to submit a cash flow forecast, additional information will be provided, and this again will be followed by a Q&A. On the 26th of July, so shortly before the end of phase 1, a final Q&A session will be organized with the goal for the completeness check to ensure that all documentation and information is contained within the application, and again followed with a Q&A. Additionally, on the platform, you will find a frequently asked question tab, which will be updated regularly with all the relevant questions. So regarding the platform, for those of you who have not yet visited and registered, here you have the link, so the researchindustrycollaboration.lu, where you can create your own account. Then here on the top, you can select the call. So in this case, the joint defense call, where you will find the information regarding this call and also the call text. And here you will also be able to browse existing project ideas, to find the partner for your project, and also to create your application for the phase 1. So with this, I want to thank you all for your attention, and I would suggest that we move on to the question and answers.
Great, thank you, Eric. Thank you all. I think this concludes our presentation of the joint defense call. It provided you with the most important aspects of the joint call, and we hope, of course, that this and encourage you to not only make a deeper dive into the call text, but most of all, to come up with innovative project ideas on dual-use technologies in space or lightweight materials. I can imagine now that there are a lot of questions, and I've seen there have already some being answered. Now it's good to see that we still have 15 minutes left, so we will start right away with the Q&A. Just before starting, I would like to mention that there is an FAQ on the Research Industry Collaboration platform. So relevant questions and answers of today's information session and those which will come up in the next weeks will be posted on the FAQ of the defense call. Moreover, as indicated by Eric, additional Q&A sessions will be organized in the upcoming weeks with respective registration links already available on the Research Industry Collaboration platform. So let's have a quick look at the question. I'll just maybe take the first one that was left also in the chat from Sebastian Zink. So is the performance in terms of circularity and sustainability also a criteria within the impact evaluation? I might take this question. So in fact, circularity and sustainability are of key importance in this call, and as such, they are also being addressed directly within the priority domains. Nevertheless, it's not a direct evaluation criteria. I think it's important that this topic is addressed within the priority domains. Then the next question I see from Simon Moser. So can companies provide in-kind contributions as part of their potential co-funding capacity? So I think this is generally possible. Now, in fact, it has to be seen to which extent this can also be covered within the R&D grants for companies. I might address the discussion also to Eric Lauer, who will be directly supporting companies.
Yes, yeah, I think this will need to be seen a bit more in detail, and but this could, of course, be a possibility.
Okay, so I think also just to mention that in the phase one of the call, there is a template that you will need to fill in with a general budget overview, and we will also have a dedicated Q&A session on these details. And yeah, that's then for the first question. We'll go over to the next question by Dermot Doyle. Does the IP ownership between project partners need to be detailed in the application? I can answer this question. So yes, we have within the template for the phase one already included some chapters on the IP. So you don't need to provide yet a complete collaboration agreement and with the IP details, but it's important to understand who will be the IP owner, where the IP comes from, in order to ensure that freedom to operate is guaranteed. Then the next question from Simon Moser again. So WRT to the collaboration scheme, company and research organization, who should have the lead, the company or the research organization? I may take this question as well, but maybe Richard, you can complement. I think from Luxembourg side, from the Ministry of Economy side, there's no compulsory need to be in the lead for companies. So this is completely up to the consortium to form. But what is important is really to have a balanced partnership if you decide to go into a consortium.
Yes, I concur completely with that assessment. There is no need for one of the partners to really have the lead like it is or would be in a Eurostars consortium, where always the company needs to be in the lead. This is definitely not the case here. This needs to be a balanced consortium between both partners, but there's no one that needs to be definitely in the lead here. But of course, the lead can be taken by someone if this is the most efficient way for the consortium.
Richard, if you may, you can also address the next question from Simon Moser. So is there a limit in terms of number of proposals a PI can submit?
In short answer, no, not in this specific call. It might change perhaps in the future, but since this is a pilot call and the first time, we want to see all the ideas you can offer and do not limit you in forming these ideas. So API can have multiple project proposals. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Then the next question from Jean-François Genest. So if we need academy, does the academy need to be from Luxembourg? So here I would just like to point out, so it's not a need, it's not compulsory to collaborate with the academy or with research organizations. It is, of course, and as Richard has pointed out, more attractive for research organizations if then they engage into a collaboration with a company. But with regards to the country, yes, so if they partner up in the consortium and if they want to benefit directly from the R&D grants of the Minister of Economy or FNR, it needs to be from Luxembourg. Nevertheless, there's an opening towards subcontractors, so an academic partner from a NATO country, EU country, or EA country could join as a subcontractor within the project. So next question from Yu Song, second phase, FPP. In the case of the collaborative project between a research organization and the company, does each entity have to submit the same FPP on each side, or only does the principal investigator's organization submit only one FPP on his or her eligible platform? I might just take this answer for companies. So in fact, and then Richard can complement, but for the companies, as said, we really rely on the existing aid scheme and also the procedures. So for full project proposals for companies, they will use the common standard application process of the Ministry of Economy via MyGuichet, and the full project proposals will probably quite similar on research organization side, but I will let Richard complete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here I also concur with this assessment. We will have two separate applications on both platforms for the companies and the research organizations. And the project descriptions, for example, will not be completely the same. They will not be identical, but they will be very similar, and we strive to limit redundancies or information that needs to be provided, so that we do not have two completely separate applications, and that you only do need to make the work once and just distribute this information on the two separate platforms. But there will be necessary information that is perhaps only relevant for one or the other side, but this part of the application we will limit to an absolute minimum.
Okay, thank you. Next question just from the chat box also, from Roland Tito. So could a cybersecurity project also be admitted in the call? Yes, definitely. I think with the space priority, it's also clear that cyberspace and cyber in space is an essential element, and this can definitely be a contributing part within the space domain projects. Then next question from Marco Marquez about the clearance levels of potential projects. Will the projects be published, or some secret clearance is envisaged? I will give some answer, but maybe then also Colonel Hoffmann can complement. I think the TRL levels that we are focusing on do at this level not yet require any clearance level. The idea is really to enable as much collaboration as possible, also with the synergies within the civil domain. Therefore, it is not planned to have any clearance level at that stand. Nevertheless, there might be some complementary obligations from the Directorate of Defence. Maybe Colonel Hoffmann, if you want to point out on that side, you're very welcome.
Thank you. So at the moment, we stay what Mr. Link said. So there are no intentions at the moment to put clearance levels on the projects, but we have to first see what projects are coming up before we can give a final answer. So it depends on in what direction and in what level the project is discussed. So at that moment, there might be some clearance to be put on, but in the initial phase, there's not considered to put a high clearance level on it, because as it was already said also by Mr. Ling, one of the aims is dual use, so it would be hard to put clearance on it, but we have to first see what projects come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Colin Hoffman. A next question then from Ion Turcano. So for phase 1, do we have to have a full proposal description? So no, there also, I want again to point out the maximum of flexibility and agile way we wanted to procure in this call. So for the first phase, the project template, as you will see in the platform, is quite simple. It's basically 2-3 pages that you need to fill in, and it does not cover yet the full project proposal. In that sense, the first phase is really focusing on the project ideas, the project outlines, giving a first view on what can be expected, and then only once, if your project is retained for phase 2, you will need to go into the full project proposal. So are there still other questions? I think here was again a question from Sam Stancliffe about startups. So can I clarify, as a startup, do we need to be registered in Luxembourg before phase 1, or can we register if successful as phase 1? So here, I think it is in fact planned that within the phase 1, you do not yet have to be registered in Luxembourg. Nevertheless, and this is also something which is compulsory for startups, there will be a necessity to provide a business plan and a cash flow forecast. And we expect, of course, that if you are retained within phase 1, that you will then register and establish an entity in Luxembourg. I think these are points that come quite natural, because then for the phase 2, you will really go much more into details and also be able to get individual support of Luxinnovation. Maybe just 2 last questions. So there's the next one from Marcello Milani. Lightweighting is very broad. How can we get guidance on the priorities for different possible applications? For example, aerial, maritime, or ground equipment, personal protection. Are the priorities similar to the ones of EDA projects? Yeah, so this is a very good question, and thank you for that. I think lightweight is very broad, but it's very much applicable to many different operational domains in defense, and space is, for instance, a key one. Therefore, there might already be synergies with the space domain, but in a larger term, yes, I think you can apply it to any operational area, including equipment, personal protection. We have in the call text priority domains or examples that were defined and based on which you can align. But, and this is also important to say, is that all these priority domains have been selected in alignment, in total alignment with EDA and EDF. Therefore, if you identify potential EDA projects where you would like to pass first via a national project, this is absolutely okay as well. So I think we covered most of the questions, and I guess we can just maybe take a last one. I think here from Hussein Demirci. Yes, so the presentation, the slides, everything will be made available. This info session was recorded and will be made available on the research industry collaboration platform. So I think with that, we covered a lot of questions. I would really like to thank a lot the audience for having stayed with us to the end. Thank you very much also to the speakers for the information, and I wish you all a very fruitful thinkings, and most of all, good luck for the first phase of the Joint Defense Co. Enjoy your lunch and see you hopefully soon again.